Chad. It's a pleasure being on your show. As I told your partner there, I live down in Bigfoot country in Arkansas now. As a matter of fact, as they say, I live so close to Louisiana you could take a rock and throw it and hit Louisiana from where I live. But anyway, it's a pleasure being on your show.
I think a lot of people would like to hit Louisiana with a rock, so I think that's that works out perfect. And it's a pleasure to have you back. The last time we had you on, you and John did a full career retrospective, very informative, and almost like the perfect preview for your book, One Last Ride, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And at the time, you were just, I believe, you were either in the middle of writing it with our good buddy Nick Massey, who we'll get into as well in a few minutes, but it was basically in the early stages of getting the book together. And to see how it has been released, and like I told you as we got started, we had you up at our show, Mark Out at the Meadowlands, this past April. We co-promoted with Nick in Captain's Corner. And it's very cool when you see the book in your hand and you get to actually turn the pages of it. So what has the book response been for you, and have you enjoyed it thus far?
It has really, I've been very surprised, and it's just like I used to tell the kids that I taught how to wrestle. I said, I was honest in the book. I didn't throw anybody under the bus. I didn't talk about affairs with women or anything like that. I talked about wrestling and things that happened to me. And, you tell it like it is and you don't lie. They say a liar's got to have a good memory. Well, I got a great memory, but I'm not a liar. But, we just went from year to year to year, and, like with Nick, I mean, what a great guy he is. He has really helped me out with this book and helped me promote it, and we just started off, and it just kept on escalating, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah, and I believe at that show it was the first time that the book had really been out there and really marketed at a show of that caliber. So it was really cool to kind of, like I said, get a chance to see it, hold it, thumb through it, and really drink it in. And having you on when we did back in the, I'd say, about the spring of 2018, how far it came is pretty remarkable. But those books that, like you said, when you tell it like it is and you don't go into the dirt, you just tell the truth, to me, those end up being the best books.
Well, I that's the way I look at it. It's just like when I taught Booker T and Stevie Ray how to wrestle, I told them, I said, look, and I looked them straight in the eye and I said, people are going to call you the N-word, and I said, they're going to talk behind your back because you guys are so magnificent looking, and they didn't know what they had as far as talent or appearance until they had been in it for a while. I said, but like I said, these guys, I told them the truth, and years later they flew me out to Las Vegas so they could be inducted into the Cauliflower Alley Club Association, I guess is what you'd call it. And that was quite an honor for me, but telling the truth never hurts.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the Cauliflower Alley Club for them and also the WWE Hall of Fame for them. So obviously they started off at in good hands, and you saw them blossom, and obviously on the tag team end of things became one of the best tag teams of the 1990s and one of the more revered teams of the 90s, breaking barriers left and right. But then Booker T himself becoming the icon that he became. I mean, he really transcended, I think, what anybody could have ever thought Harlem Heat was, and Harlem Heat was a pretty damn good tag team.
Yeah, they were. And, what was very nice and humbling to me was that he always mentioned that I helped train him, and that made me feel good. Not that I really cared if he said it, but it was very pleasant that he did, say that I helped train him, and because there's so many ins and outs of wrestling that people, even the people that say, okay, well, I'm smart to the business and everything, but there's so many technical things, it's like one of my favorite sayings was, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And then it's a catch-22 situation because it's how you do what you do, but I mean, it makes a difference, I'm going to kind of veer off of what we're talking about, but I remember Lou Thez, a world champion. One time he's looking through the curtain, and I walked up, and I said, Lou, what are you doing? He said, I'm watching the matches. This was the second match. And I said, but you're a world champion. Why do you do it? He said, Scott, you always learn. You can steal something from somebody and use it in your own repertoire. And he was honest with me, and I never forgot that, But one of the few things, you pick up in the business, if you talk to the right people, you'll learn a whole lot about this business that they don't even know. I say they, I mean the people that were not wrestlers, but still think they know it all. They don't, but that's the way it goes.
And if somebody like Lou Thez is sitting there and watching the matches at the beginning of the night, then obviously that's something that is it's pretty important. And if somebody like Lou Thez and his stature, and especially what he meant to the business, it might make a lot of people around the room kind of turn their head and be like, well, maybe we should be doing what he's doing, because he's obviously done everything right up to this point.
After he told me that, I always watched all the matches, and I stole a few things from guys to use it on my own, and it never hurts, you try to make yourself be put over with the people, and that's how you do it. By being creative in the ring and learning different things that you can do in the ring that you didn't think you could do or didn't know about to do. So it was a lot of fun.
I love about the book is like kind of the testimonials, if you will, from your peers and fellow wrestlers and, other guys that I consider legends of the business, but they speak about you so highly, like Brian Adias, Eddie Mansfield, like we said before, Len Denton, Manny Fernandez, the Dirty White Boy, Killer Tim Brooks. So it's very cool. You get a lot of the old school legendary guys having a lot of positive things to say about you. Is that humbling as well?
Yes, it is. And you mentioned somebody that I hadn't thought about in a couple of weeks was Killer Tim Brooks. He and I used to go out and have some hellacious matches. And Tim's health is not real good right now. And I told him when I talked to him, I said, look, Tim, it seems like once a month one of us is dying off. I said, I know you got cancer and all that. And I said, but hang on till I can come see you. We're going to be down in San Antonio, and I'm going to stop off and see him. But he was a rugged, tough SOB. And we just had so much fun in the ring together. We could, in the old days, I say we could start them off. It's like a story. You start them off, you tell things, and you reach a hill, and you go back down, you reach a mountain, you go up and down, and we did that, and the people enjoyed it. We loved entertaining the people because obviously they wanted to come back, and obviously that's the way we made our living, and we worked hard at it. We really did.
And it's pretty cool that you can kind of, look back and obviously maybe these guys say some stories you haven't heard in a while, or, like you said, Tim Brooks brings up something and it brings up a great memory and you can kind of put it in the book or, share with everybody. And that's got to be a pretty cool experience as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's so many memories that I tried to remember as many of them as I could, and I left a few of them out and some for obvious reasons, but it's just like I always tried to, like I said, be honest with the people, and especially in the book, I tried to tell them, things that were said, and a lot of them was completely really funny. Like the story about me and Bruce Swayze and Brute Bernard and Sweet Hansen, when Brute's coming over the back seat to kill Bruce because he kept saying from the day we walked out, from the time we walked out of the building, from the time we got to the 7-Eleven, and from the time we got on the highway, are we there yet? And you're looking at 440 miles from up in the Norfolk, Virginia, down to Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a murderous ride. But back then, you drove everywhere. Nowadays these guys are flying everywhere. But it was. I can just picture Bruce right now saying to Brute, "Are we there yet?" After about the 40th time, and we're not even out of the city limits of Virginia, Norfolk, and he's throwing the bologna and cheese and mustard and beer up in the air, And he said, "I kill you." He was French Canadian. If it hadn't been for Sweet, he probably would have. But and Bruce was laughing so hard, you know. But there was a lot of camaraderie. I don't know what kind of camaraderie these guys have nowadays, but I mean, we would have done anything. You know, you talk bad about somebody, you're going to have to put up with all of us, you know. And it was Bruce is still quite a character, you know. And anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love also in the book, it's kind of like what you're saying now. You know, you get little stories, maybe little road stories, but then you have the cowboy takes, where, you know, basically I guess Nick just kind of gives you a name, he drops you a name, and you give a good little brief description on each wrestler, kind of thing. It's like, you know, he'll say Jimmy Cornette or Iceman King Parsons, and boom, you got a story about each guy. So that kind of shows you've been around the business for a long time, and you pretty much know all the major players and some pretty big time legends in the business.
Yeah, I always referred to wrestling as dancing. I danced with all of them. You know, I mean, guys like Nick Bockwinkel, Abdullah the Butcher, Andre the Giant. You know, the list just goes on and on and on. But when you've been in it for 20-some-odd years, you know, you're going to run across most of these guys, and some of them you see them once, you never see them again, and there's other guys, you see them and you say, wow, how you been? I mean, it's like you take up right where you left off the last time you saw them, you know. And there's been so many of them that have passed away, you know. I'm just like Harley races last week. I was just sick, you know, thinking about him passing away. A rugged, mean SOB that wouldn't take anything from anybody, loved the business, took tremendous bumps all the time. I'll tell you a quick story about Harley and I. I'm wrestling him one night, and he's got the belt. He's laying on his back on the floor. Now, picture this. One guy's holding his shoulders. Another guy has got his foot under one ankle, and he's rotating the other leg. And he did it to both legs so his hips would loosen up. We get out in the ring, and Harley says, all right, kid. He says, throw me in, duck under my clothesline me over the top rope backwards, you know, which is something we always did. I said, Harley, I don't want to do that to you, man. He said, if you don't, I'm going to beat the SH out of you, and nobody will recognize you. So I did it. I mean, that's just the way Harley was. You know, it didn't matter. As long as he could loosen up, he was ready to go. And he performed like a pro every time, you know. Sure miss him.
Yeah, and it's interesting in the book you kind of talk about Harley, but obviously at this point he was still alive, and even in the book you say, you know, something along the lines of, it's crazy that he's still one of the guys that's still with us that was a part of that Survivor Series '88. So that's kind of an interesting thing going back and you know, looking at the book as well.
I was talking to Mercedes Solis the other day. You guys would know him as Tito Santana.
Yep.
And I said, he said, do you realize we had like an 8-man tag match on each side? And I looked at the picture of all the guys, Andre, Dino Bravo, Harley, and I said, do you realize they're all dead on that side? Every one of them. Not one guy that I worked with in that show. It was a Survivor Series. Mm-hmm. Not one of them was alive. And it was kind of freaky thinking about it to me, you know. And Merced said, yep. He said, I realize that too, so. But that's life. Ain't none of us going to make it out alive, are we?
Yep, that's true. Yeah, you got Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, all unfortunately passed away. But what a legendary team.
Yes, it was really fun being in that. And it's so funny because up in New York, I wasn't a big draw or anything like that. I was just one of the girls in the show, is what I used to say. and we, I forgot where I was going with this, but anyway, we had the match, the tag match. I was there, and we all were at the show. It was a Survivor Series, and Vince walks up to me. He said, Scott, I need for you to work tonight. He said, Brian Blair won't make it. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to make a few extra shekels here. And I did, that's the only reason I was on that, but, because I was never, as they said, figured in as one of their draw-featured guys, like Hogan or Savage or Steamboat and somebody like that, Not that I couldn't have done it, it wasn't in the cards, and I just wasn't part of it. But I was very pleasantly pleased that Vince would walk up to me and say, I want you on this 8-man tag. So that's how I got on it. Sorry, Brian, but anyway.
Great, very, very memorable match, though. It's awesome to be a part of Survivor. Like you said, make a little extra shekels, make some extra money, and obviously do it that way. But with the WWF, and obviously, there's basically a big chapter in the book. You talk extensively about it. Were you happy in the long run with the run you had in WWF?
Yeah, it's just, I told somebody one time, I said, did you ever have a job that you couldn't, once you finish that night, you're out of work, and you get up the next morning and you can't wait to get back in that ring, and they pay you for it. Sometimes you didn't make a lot of money. Sometimes you made a whole hell of a lot of money. But it was a business that I dearly, dearly loved, and I worked out 6 days a week, hour to 2 hours a day for 20 years, never missed. I don't care if I was blind, crippled, or crazy, I'd be in the damn gym because, number one, when I first started, I'm being trained by Bobby Duncombe, Dick Murdoch, Duke Myers, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk. That is a whole mouthful of people that have great talent and that taught me. And I just... let's see, where was I going with this? Anyway, I just, let me go veer off of that. I just dearly loved it, that I could do something and get paid for it. And it's, a lot of people go, well, I got this 9-to-5 job, and I'm getting paid, but I really don't care for it. Well, I did. I loved every minute of it. But like I was saying, the working out, I never missed a day except for Sundays. I wouldn't work out on Sundays, but and I remember now what I was going to say. These guys said, well, you're never really going to be big enough or anything like that. You'll never do this or that. But when I became a champion and a world champion and walked through the curtains at Madison Square Garden or the Cow Palace in San Francisco and all the big places, I thought to myself, all you doubting Thomases, take a look at me now. Because, I was like 5'10.5", 5'11", maybe not. They billed me at 6 foot, but I was a solid 250. I worked out simply because I kept thinking in the back of my mind, them saying, well, you'll never be able to do it. You'll never do this or that. And so any of you people out there that want to wrestle, don't listen to what they say. Just get your ass together and keep working out, and you want it bad enough, you can do it, and that's the way I looked at it.
And it is interesting as well in the book, you do kind of touch on being 250 and being a little bit wider, maybe a little bit thicker, and steroids kind of playing a role, and that kind of being big in the WWF, or as far as getting as big as some of those guys in the WWF. Talk about kind of opening up a little bit and maybe sharing some things like the steroids that maybe people wouldn't expect you to bring up.
Well, I admitted it, I think, in the book, and I'll admit it now. I took steroids, and you got to think of this. You're on the road, and if you're dedicated to what you do, you go to the gym, you work out, you pump yourself up, but and I can tell now it took a toll on me, like in my joints, my shoulders, my hips, my knees, and things like that. But there's no way I could have bench pressed 400 pounds 10 times like I did, and I got 30 guys that'll tell you they saw me do it, and it's just, if you work out like we did, or if you're on the road like that, you don't really get to rest properly. But if you're taking the steroids, it will mask a lot of pain and, a lot of things that you tear up in your body, and I had to do it. I mean, it's just, well, you don't really have to do it. I take that back. I did it to stay in great shape, and it was just, it's like I said one time to a young guy. He said, well, did you ever take steroids? I said, yeah. He said, why? I said, well, you have a window in time in your profession and in your life that you can wrestle on one side of it. Then once you go through that window, you cannot come back and do it again. And you can try, and I've seen a lot of guys try and embarrass themselves because they kept trying when they shouldn't have. But the window in time was, I did everything I could possibly do to make people enjoy what I did, and I retired when I was 42, which was really kind of late, but it was my window in time, and I could not walk back through it and keep on keeping on, as Dusty Rhodes used to say to me, But that's just the steroids helped me maintain when I thought that, I tore up my knees, I broke my collarbone away from my shoulder, broke a finger in my hand, teeth, but like Wahoo McDaniels told me one night, I came back in the ring and we had a 2 out of 3 fall match. And I'm bitching and crying and carrying on about it. And he said, kid, I won't tell you what he used to call me, but anyway, he said, kid, you can find sympathy alphabetically in the dictionary. And I think I said this in the book, between SHI and syphilis. Look it up alphabetically. And it's true, but you just, with the steroids, I kept on going. I mean, like my collarbone was messed up, and I taped it back down, and I tore my groin one time wrestling Nick Bockwinkel. I'm telling you what, boys, you tear something down there like that, you will know it. It will remind you every time you roll over in bed, or you stand up, or you walk, turn, whatever. But the steroids helped it. It masked the pain that you had. And that's just the way I had to, because that was my life. That was I'm out of work tonight because I finished the match, and I got to get up in the morning and go to another town and start it all over again, and they're going to pay me for it.
You got to make sure you recover from those injuries and make the next town. And at that point, I feel like, not to say that I knew for sure, but most of the guys seemed like they were doing it and looking bigger and looking great on TV, because you made a great point. You only have a certain window in time that you're going to be in your prime in the WWF or, in that national spotlight. You got to make it count.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way. I hyperextended my right knee in a ring in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I'll never forget. I'm talking, the knee bends one way, right? Well, mine bent the other way that time. If you watch me walk now, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But like Wahoo said, where I could find sympathy, But anyway, Sputnik Monroe, when I tore up that knee, he said, kid, we're going to buy a gallon of wine. I said, okay. Not that I'm a wine drinker. We drank that wine, and we're in Florida, and there was a pool at his apartment, and I swam in that pool till I thought I was going to throw up. But, the next day, although it hurt a little, I got out there and performed. And God bless you, Sputsy. I know you're in that wrestling ring in the sky, but thank you again, my friend.
Now, in the book, obviously, you talked about so many things, and we're kind of saying wrestling, talking about WWF and things like that, but you do talk about life after wrestling as well. Was that kind of an easy thing to talk about, some of the things that happened to you after, you got out of the wrestling business?
Well, I got to change my ear. That one's getting cauliflower. Okay. I'll never forget, we were in Odessa, Texas, and it was 1990, just turned 1990. And I knew that I was getting my walking papers from Vince McMahon, And I walked in there and I said, before you start, Vince, I said, do I have a job with you or not? And he said, nah. And he said, want you to go down to Atlanta and work for them for a year and come back and we'll do something with you. And I'm 42 years old at the time. And I said, Vince, I can accept failure when given a chance to fail. I said, but you never really gave me a chance. And I understand I wasn't figured in. And it's just like wrestling business is like any business. It's political. And maybe somebody didn't care for me or whatever, or maybe they didn't like the way I wrestled. Who knows? Nobody ever said. But I left. I went back to Dallas, and then I talked to Ivan Putski, and he had a school down there in Houston, and I went down there, and that's where I met Booker T and Stevie Ray. But I just... like I said, I worked out 6 days a week, an hour to 2 hours at a time for years. But when I went back to Dallas, I sat home and I drank beer for 3 months. Never lifted a weight, not once, because I was depressed. I mean, it's you do what I did for so long. The roar of the crowd, the smell of the popcorn, like Billy Graham Superstar used to say. And I said, it's just you give your heart, your blood, your soul to the business, and you all of a sudden it's gone. But like somebody once said, nothing lasts forever, my friend. Nothing. It's just like being a disc jockey, like what you guys are doing. One of these days you're going to have to quit, or you're going to pass it on to somebody else. And to me it was depressing because I devoted myself to the business. I was religious. When I first started, we go to the bars, drink, and somebody would say something about the business, the fight would be on. And I fought many a guy in the bars doing that. But we were protecting what was ours. And anyway, I sometimes veer off in some of these little dissertations that I'm telling you, but hopefully you can catch it all.
Oh, yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. And you do talk about, which is crazy, that you had to go through it. You had a heart attack as well, and you talk about that in the book as well. That had to be a tough it's a tough subject to kind of talk about.
Well, I was working for security. After I got out of the business, I worked security at the Luxor in Las Vegas for 15 years, something like that. And then I went down to, I got a divorce, and I went down to Florida because I had a very close friend and still do, that lived there in Ocala, Florida. And I got a job working at a security company down in St. Pete. And excuse me. I'm going to have to cough here. Anyway, I came home from work one night, and I felt this tingling in my shoulder. And it felt like a ghost was tapping me on the shoulder. I thought, what the hell is this? And next thing I know, I started spitting uncontrollably, and then my teeth started hurting. And in my infinite wisdom, I said, something's not right here. Hopped in my car, this was at midnight, drove 70 blocks down to St. Anthony's in St. Pete, got out of the car, walked in, and there's 3 doctors there. And since I'm an old guy now, I said, boys, I think I got a problem. And they said, explain it. And I told them that was the last time I was on my feet for like 3 or 4 days. And it was the strangest thing, because I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what the hell did I do to do this? Because I trained hard. Matter of fact, the morning of the night that I had the heart attack, I went to the gym. I did 200 leg extensions, and I did squats, rode the bike. So it doesn't matter who you are or what you know. If it's your turn to have a heart attack, you're going to have it. But mine, you know how you see in the movies, people grab their arm and they grimace and all this stuff. No, nothing like that. All it felt like was just something was just kind of tickling me on the shoulder. But when my teeth started hurting, like somebody was pulling them out with pliers, I said, something's not right. So that's just the way it was, you know. And somebody said, well, you, excuse me again. They said, well, it could be hereditary. Well, hell, I never knew my father. I don't know if it was hereditary. My mother never had heart problems. But if it's your turn to have one, you're going to have it. And I guess it was my turn. But it was so strange. I didn't even worry about it. I just, I woke up, and they're in there, and they had this rod, or not a rod, or a wire, I guess, run through my groin up into my aortic part of my heart. And they started pulling it out, and the nurse said, this may hurt a little. Oh, I'm telling you something, boys. I would rather have had every other part of my body slammed in a door than have this happen again. It was excruciating, the pain. So, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat it when I talk about a heart attack, you know. I didn't have, prior to that, even after I woke up, I never had any pain or nothing in my chest. I just had this scar on my chest. And then I had, if I could find them, next time I see you, I'll show you pictures of what I look like. I look like I was in a knife fight and the only one didn't have a knife, you know. But it's a whole different world afterwards, you know. And it took me a while to recoup from it, but, you know, I'm doing fine now. So, good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll stick around for a little while longer.
Absolutely. And we need you to stick around longer as well. And I highly, highly recommend One Last Ride, the tale of Cowboy Scott Casey. Great book. And there's just a couple little interesting tidbits just to throw out there for some wrestling fans. If you don't know the true story of who Eugene is, now I'm not talking about the wrestler from 2004, Nick Densmore, that character. If you don't know who Eugene is, you talk about him in the book, and then also Dr. Zahorian as well. So those are two huge points that I almost want to tease the fans a little bit about. And if you want to know more about those two guys and you don't know about it, get this book, because when you talk about that, it's so interesting because you're so honest about it, and you're so matter of fact. It's like, yes, that's awesome that you bring that up, you know, Zahorian and the Eugene.
Yeah, well, you know, he was our man we went to get our steroids and stuff, you know, and Eugene, God bless him. I don't know if he's still alive. He's a little mongoloid guy, and he always said, you know what? I'm not going to say it over the radio, but anyway,
right?
You know,
yep.
But what? Oh Lord, between the British Bulldogs and me laughing at him, he never missed a stroke. If you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, but he was quite a character. You know, there were so many of them, you know. I'll give you an example of a character. And I never knew this young man's name. I'm in the Boston Gardens, getting ready to go on, and I'm peeking through the curtains, watching the matches, and all of a sudden something hit me on the ankle, and it hurt. And I turned around, and here was this little guy. He had 2 wooden pegs for legs and 1 peg for his arm, and the other one that he had a cane. And he said, get the you-know-what out of the way. I said, sorry, didn't mean to. You know, I looked at him, and how can you not feel compassion for somebody? And he looked like he might have been a dwarf or something like that. And I didn't even put that in the book. I just now thought about that again. There's a few things that I missed that I should have put in there, but still, you be grateful for your health and try to be humble, and people like that, you know, you bend over backwards to help them, you know, like I said, I don't remember the young man's name, but he was, pardon me, a mess, and I had compassion and felt sorry for him, you know.
Well, wrestling fans can be grateful and head to the website for the book, which is cowboyscottcasey.com. And not only can they get their hands on the book, but they could also get a signed copy of the book as well. And that's something that if you are a true wrestling fan of the golden age, of the age that we all look back at with much revere, and we wish we could go back to those days right now and watch it every single day, you would get your hands on this book because it is an absolute just treasure of stories. It's a time capsule for the guys that you interacted with, the guys that you were able to work with, and the guys that you called friends. So that's basically my big plug that I could give for the website. Again, cowboyscottcasey.com. Scott, before we let you go, give us one last plug for the book, and again, where we can kind of be driven to if we want to get our hands on it.
Well, The Last Ride is what it's called, and like I said, I had to thank Nick Massey. I mean, without him, I could never have done it. It was just an idea and a dream that I came up with, and I spoke with him, and we met, and he injected the idea of doing this in a book, and I think that people won't be disappointed in it. I really don't, because like I said, I put my heart and soul in the business, and I did the same thing in the book.